The asymmetrical horror game Texas Chain Saw Massacre, obviously based on the movie franchise of the same name, has now released. And upon hearing the term asymmetrical horror, a lot of people readied their keyboards to type out, "So it's like Dead by Daylight," as if Dead by Daylight was the first of its kind. It wasn't, but it definitely popularized the genre. Many do wonder if the two games are the same, however. And the short answer is no. They're both asymmetrical horror games, sure, but that's pretty much where the similarities end. Let me show you. Let's begin by briefly going through the basic gameplay of both games. First, you need to know what asymmetrical horror is. The term refers to horror games where there's two sides, or teams, that go against each other. But these two teams have different abilities and goals that change the gameplay depending on what side you're on. Most commonly, one of these teams also has a smaller amount of members than the other. In Dead by Daylight, I'll refer to it as DBD from here on out. There's one killer and 4 survivors. The killer's goal is simple: to kill all the survivors. The survivors instead have to escape alive, which is done by repairing 5 generators that spawn in on the map in order to open the exit gates. In Texas Chain Saw Massacre, which I'll refer to as simply Texas from here on out, there's 3 killers called the family and 4 victims who have to stay alive and escape. The victims in this game have at least 4 escape routes, which all require different tasks to be completed in different areas of the map. The family members also have Grandpa on their side, who sits in a chair and sometimes marks moving victims. In order for him to do so, he needs to be fed blood that can be found in buckets scattered around the map. But hey, see, there's the difference already. One game has 1 killer, whereas the other has 3. Some of you might not even think that's a big difference, but it really does change how the game plays, both when you play as family and when you play as a victim. Let's dive even deeper. As part of the family, you have to work together as a team to cover the expansive maps and all the possible exits. The family members have various skills to help out in different aspects. For example, one can lay down traps that are very useful by exit mechanics or commonly traveled paths. Another can track the victim's footprints to figure out in what direction they've gone, if you lose them in a chase or simply can't find them. Leatherface himself has his chainsaw and is able to one-shot victims. While these abilities may sound strong, you'd have a pretty hard time stopping all 4 victims from escaping on your own. In DBD, all individual killers are strong and fast enough to cover the entire map and incapacitate survivors in 2 hits. After doing so, the killer can place the survivors on hooks where they hang out. Until they're rescued by a teammate or their health slowly deteriorates and they die. This is not the case in Texas, where the killers have stamina bars and different speeds at which they move. The victims can use shortcuts to escape a chase, and only a select few family members can use these shortcuts as well, which means the victims have an advantage here. The family members don't need to hook their victims anywhere, and instead have to inflict enough damage to drain the victim's health bar before they can go in for the final kill. 2 hits aren't enough in this game. This way, unlucky survivors can die pretty quickly, but it's actually harder than it sounds for the family to pull this off. Playing as a victim gets all the more intense when you have 3 people to look out for instead of just 1. You could get cornered. While running away from one family member, you could bump into another. You could be attacked by them all at once and not have a chance of escaping their hits. To many DBD players who are used to just facing off against one killer, this might sound unfair. Well, it actually isn't as bad as it sounds. In fact, some players even think the game is victim-sided, which means it's easier for victims to escape than it is for the family to kill them. Just like the family, the victims have special abilities that help them too. For example, one character can actually stun the killers by aggressively running into them. Another can listen out for the family and mark their positions. Teamwork can help a lot here, but if you're quick and careful, you can make it just fine on your own too. An additional thing that does help balance a game like this is the fact that there's multiple exits. For a victim to successfully win a game in Texas, they need to unlock one of the exits and of course escape. Each map generally has 4 types of escape routes: valve, fuse, car battery, and generator. Contrary to what you do in DBD, if you're going for the generator exit, you actually destroy it in this game rather than repair it. It's powering an electrified gate, so in order to not get zapped, DBD players will have to go completely against their nature. The car battery exit is similar, the only real difference being that it's a car battery instead of a generator. For the valve exit, you need to first find a valve somewhere on the map, then attach this to a tank somewhere else, then turn the valve, and then wait for a pressure gate to open. It may sound complicated, but once you get the hang of it, the fact that you don't have to stay in one place all the time and have to bounce between areas can actually help you out. For the fuse exit, you have to find a fuse somewhere on the map, then open up a fuse box somewhere else, then insert the fuse and solve a small math puzzle. I know, math, ew, but it's not that bad. This then opens the basement exit, so you quickly have to make your way down to the basement, find the door, and escape before it closes as it's timed. The valve exit is also timed, so you have to be quick using both of these. If you do miss your window, all you have to do is return to the tank or fuse box to open the exits again. Sound overwhelming? Don't worry, I get it. In DBD, you only have 2 possible escape routes, and for both of them, all you need to do is repair generators. After doing so, you have to make your way to an exit gate and open it. If you're the only survivor left alive, you also have the option to find a hatch that spawns somewhere on the map, which is an instant escape unless the killer finds the hatch first and closes it. Something that can help you reach your victory in Texas is actually the starting lobby itself. There you can see what map you're heading to and what characters you'll be facing off against, so you can prepare accordingly by picking whatever character and abilities may work for the specific match. In DBD, the killer can see what items the survivors are bringing, but that's all. The killer is also locked into the character they chose when queuing up for the match and can't change it accordingly like you can in Texas. In comparison, perhaps DBD even sounds too simple and straightforward now. This is not the case, however, and that's attributed to how the characters, especially the killers, work. As previously mentioned, the family members in Texas have various abilities that help them in the game, but these aren't strong enough for one killer to work alone. The characters have been made with teamwork in mind, as it would be unfair for 3 killers to be individually powerful enough to take down all the victims on their own. In DBD, the killers were made to work on their own, and thus have to be fast and powerful enough to cover the entire map and take down survivors without anyone helping them. The maps in DBD are also smaller and more streamlined, whereas the maps in Texas not only have at least 2 levels, the basement and the ground floor, but they're also more convoluted and take some time to learn how to navigate without getting lost. In Texas, when one killer does take out all the 4 victims, been there, done that, it's still thanks to teamwork that the victims were unable to open any of the various exits in time. That, or it's one skilled family player going up against new or very unlucky victims. While Leatherface does have the ability to one-shot victims, it can be really hard to succeed in doing so. You have to keep his chainsaw revved up to a specific amount, but if you rev it up too much, the chainsaw overheats and stalls, and you have to restart it. This makes Leatherface stop in his tracks for a few seconds, which is ample time for a victim to get away. If you instead rev the chainsaw less than what's required for a one-shot kill, you don't risk stalling, but of course one hit won't be enough to take a victim down. All the other family members need several hits in order to kill a victim on their own. You also have to be fast enough to catch up to them and make sure they don't get away by crawling through shortcuts. Victims can also jump down wells, which quickly takes them to the basement and away from whoever might be chasing them, the trade-off being that the fall injures them. Strength and stamina are both equally important for family members, and are actually 2 of the 3 attributes that can be leveled up, named savagery and endurance. The third one is blood harvesting, which determines how much blood you can gather to feed Grandpa. If you recall, Grandpa can mark victims no matter where they are on the map, but only if they're moving while his ability goes off. However, if the family feeds him enough blood, he can mark victims regardless if they're moving or not. This power helps finding victims who are being extra stealthy, and is thus a pretty big game changer in some matches. On the flip side, victims can temporarily incapacitate him by scavenging for bone scraps on the map and stabbing him with one. Doing so alerts the family, however. Speaking of alerting the family, being stealthy is a big part of the gameplay. The way Texas works is that it heavily goes off of how much sound you're making. When interacting with or looting for items, you have the choice to be slow and silent or quick and loud. Being loud marks your location to the family, so this is often only done when the killers are already onto you and you have no choice but to move fast. In DBD, the way killers find you is more mixed. If you sprint, you leave scratch marks behind that visually show the killer where you've been recently. If you're injured, you leave a trail of blood behind you and your character grunts in pain. The killer is basically only alerted by sound if you quickly vault over objects or alert crows or mess up a QuickTime event. Simply performing an action won't alert the killer to your location unless they're close by. In both games, there are different abilities that can help the survivors survivors stay hidden easier. For example, in DBD, there are perks players can equip to remove scratch marks or that have them not make any noise while injured. In Texas, however, you'll always have the choice to be quiet or loud, but there's a stealth attribute you can level up in order to be faster when interacting with objects and still remain silent. And no, it's practically impossible for a victim to go through a match without interacting with objects at all, unless you let others do everything for you, or you get very lucky and the killers leave all the doors unlocked and open. The way this works is that victims start in the basement section of the map together with Leatherface. In order to leave, they have to scavenge for lockpicks and then unlock the doors that lead upstairs. Searching for lockpicks can make noise, unlocking the doors can make noise, and opening the basement doors always makes noise. You don't have a choice to be quiet there. In DBD, you can go through a whole match without making any loud noises or leave any scratch marks whatsoever, while actually helping your team survive. It takes patience, you have to be careful and a little bit lucky so as not to get spotted by the killer, but it is possible. Due to the differences in gameplay mechanics, the two games are actually quite distinct in terms of pacing, even if you don't think about it at first. When playing DBD, once the match begins, it goes from 0 to 100 instantly, as you can start doing what you need to do, be it repair generators or hunt down survivors, immediately, and keep that going until you win. You can get to work the moment you spawn in, as you're not restricted to a specific area for a certain amount of time, and you have access to the whole map from the get-go. The pacing may ramp up a bit as survivors die or generators are fixed, but that's the only aspect that really affects the pacing, which makes it feel like a steady climb towards a climax. To easier explain the pacing in Texas, the game can be divided into two parts. First, you have the beginning phase, where the victims are stuck in the basement and only Leatherface is down there with them. They have to escape the restraints and unlock the basement doors to reach the rest of the map. Leatherface can get to work in the basement and doesn't have to think about the upstairs at all until the victims successfully leave the basement, and the other family members can do whatever prep work they need to do upstairs before they're able to go after the victims directly. Once the victims finally do get out of the basement, or Grandpa wakes up thanks to the family feeding him enough blood, or the victims making too much noise, that's when the rest of the game begins, and the other two killers can get to the victims and the basement as well. No team has access to the full map or all players from the get-go. On top of that, you have the added pressure of victims dying, or escape routes getting closer to being open, just like in DBD. Because of these stages to the gameplay, the pacing and its changes throughout the match feel more emphasized in Texas. All in all, there's a multitude of aspects that differentiate the two games. Just because they're the same genre doesn't mean they play the same. By that logic, Outlast and Resident Evil would be similar because they're both survival horror games, and I think we can agree the two are pretty different. While there's even more that sets DBD and Texas apart, such as the perks and level up systems, or the fact that you can lock and unlock doors in one game and doors don't even exist in the other, I think I've gone into enough detail to explain how deep the differences actually go. It's not just the amount of players, but of course the gameplay and mechanics too. While I would say Texas has a lot more variety when it comes to gameplay, since there's so many different ways to escape and different combinations of family members, DBD has more variety in terms of perks and abilities, which can change how you personally alter your gameplay. DBD also feels more teamwork focused on the survivor's side, as you have to save your fellow survivors from hooks to have a better chance of escaping. In Texas, teamwork isn't as necessary, though you definitely have an advantage if you communicate and work together. Objectively, no game is better than the other. It's hard to pit two very different games against each other. And as someone who's played Dead by Daylight since launch and so far played Texas Chain Saw Massacre daily since that launched, they're both fun in their own ways. Dead by Daylight is a more straightforward game, which is easy to learn the very basics of, but hard to master. Texas Chain Saw Massacre is hard and at times confusing to learn, which actually makes it even more intense and scary. But once you get the hang of it, it's really fun. I'm not going to replace one for the other, because both are good games and enjoyable in their own separate ways. Have you played any of the two games? Have you played both? Maybe you haven't played any of them and you're trying to decide which one to go for. Personally, I'm intrigued to see how Texas will stay fresh and fun, as they're limited to the Texas Chain Saw Massacre universe, whereas Dead by Daylight doesn't have that sort of limit. Anyway, thank you for watching this video! I have more content like this on my channel, and I stream a lot of Texas and DBD on my Twitch, so feel free to check me out. Bye-bye!